Mr. Schiff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Director, for being here. I have two questions. The first is an issue of great concern to hundreds of jurisdictions around the country dealing with the backlog of DNA profiles collected from crime scenes and offenders. In Los Angeles, as you know, LAPD and the Sheriff's Department have backlogs of several thousand sexual assault kits. In order to close those backlogs, the city and county have often sent their samples, outsourced them to private labs. And, that's been helpful, but there is now a second backlog created because once the samples come back from the private labs, the city and county need to do a technical review of every case to ensure the private lab did the job right. So last year, for example, with the Chairman's help, we got $500,000 for the City of Los Angeles to get through the backlog. They used that money to contract out. They got through the backlog contracting out, but now they still haven't uploaded them in CODIS because of this 100% technical review requirement. That doesn't make sense to me for a couple of reasons. One, it's expensive. Two, none of the technical reviews have come up with any errors in terms of the private labs that I'm aware of. And number three, you could have a 100% requirement of a technical review where there's a match made once it's uploaded into CODIS. And therefore, only when it's actually utilized do you need to go through this, what looks increasingly like a redundant step. So my question is this really necessary? Can't we really cut down on the backlog really at no expense by eliminating this 100% review requirement, except in a case where there's a hit in CODIS where it actually will make a difference? That's the first question. Second question on mentoring. One area we've tried to make progress in dealing with circumstances where sex offenders take advantage of volunteer programs is to have a system of screening volunteers for mentoring programs. Congress tried to accomplish that goal first with the National Child Protection Act of 1993 and later with the Volunteers for Children Act. Youth-serving organizations got access to FBI checks working with their states. Still, though, more than two-thirds of the states don't have a workable, affordable system for youth-serving organizations to screen the people that want to volunteer with them. In 2003, we passed the PROTECT Act, which was a national pilot allowing youth-serving organizations to conduct national fingerprint-based background checks, and the FBI has now run, I think, 60,000 checks through the pilot. In 6% of those cases, they turn up a criminal record of serious concern. For example, the pilot identified an applicant who was a registered sex offender for having intercourse with a child under the age of 15, but because they were applying in a different state, only a national check would have turned up their record. These checks can be conducted for a fee of less than $25. I've introduced legislation with support of Chairman Conyers, the Child Protection Improvements Act, bipartisan legislation to build off the success of that pilot and put in place a permanent fee-supported system to ensure that every child-serving organization has the ability to quickly and cheaply do these checks. Senator Schumer introduced identical legislation in the Senate, but the bill has been stymied, notwithstanding bipartisan, bicameral support, in large part because we're told, despite repeated requests to DOJ and FBI, no formal comment has been offered on the bill. So they're reluctant to move the bill without having DOJ or FBI weigh in one way or the other. We like it, go forward, or we don't like it, like to see it fixed. If I wrote to the Justice Department along with Senator Schumer, Congressman Rogers, Senator Hatch, asking for the Department's views on the bill, and we still haven't heard back. If you could get us an answer, let us know whether you support it so we can move forward, or if you think things need to be changed in it, let us know that too.
I will carry, addressing the second question first.
Yes.
I say I would carry that back to the Department of Justice, and I'd say there's a request for the views letter on that particular legislation. I understand the import of that legislation and the importance, but I will carry the request back to the Department of Justice.
Well, and I think they're going to be principally interested in what is the FBI's view on this, because it implicates the FBI more than any other part of DOJ.
Well, if it is a question of additional name checks, we can handle that. If it's a question of who pays, then that's another issue altogether. I And I don't know the ins and outs of the bills. I would expect that someplace in there the cost of doing this is a factor in somebody's view. But we do, we have millions of name checks now. We're through our name check backlog, and I can't imagine that that would be a substantial issue for us. But I don't know what other issues there might be. In any event, I'll take it back to Justice and try to get back to you on that.
Thank you.
On the DNA backlog and the dialogue we've had over the years on the DNA backlog, the ingestion of the samples. Addressing, first of all, your question in terms of the request for quality control, where it is reviewed by a separate set of experts before it is put into CODIS. We are looking at that. My expectation is we'll remove some of those hurdles in the very near future. I know that has been an issue. I know you raised it yesterday with the Attorney General. It is one we've been looking at, and we want to remove the obstacles to the providing of those samples to CODIS. So I think we'd be able to get back to you relatively shortly with what we hope will be a fix in that area. More generally, I would say that the backlog that we've had in terms of ingesting the samples into DNA will be reduced to almost nothing by September. We now ingest, I think it's 25,000 samples a month. That will go up to 90,000 a month, given the resources that were appropriated for us back in 2009. We've now brought those persons on board. We are reorienting how we do things, and we're also using robotics in ways we have not in the past, so that by September our hope is that there will be no more than a 30-day delay in ingesting any samples, new samples that come in, regardless of the amounts that have tripled, quadrupled over the years, as I know you understand.
Do you know where the backlog is now, what kind of numbers you have?
I would have to get back to you on that. Yeah, I've been looking at, I've got charts showing that bam, like that in September, but where we are right now in March, I'd have to get back to you on it.
If you would, where we are now compared to a year ago,
yes,
and how fast we're processing them compared to a year ago, that would be very helpful. And I would like to work with you also on a couple of related issues. One is the lack of uniformity in the loci that we look at and those that others in Europe and other parts of the world look at. Our databases can't talk to each other because of that. I'd love to see if we can work on an international effort to harmonize how, what part of the DNA strand we look at to compare, as well as the arrestee issue, which the President recently spoke in favor of. We would love to try to advance. And finally, a couple other, no controversial issues, but is the partial, running partial DNA as well as familial DNA, both of which I support and think make sense and will take violent people off the street. And I think we can have the right safeguards in place not to violate anyone's privacy. So I look forward to working with you on those issues. Thank you.
I do too, if I might add. Looking forward to if the universe of samples that are to be ingested in, we also look at what we're going to have to do to ramp up to obtain those samples. The other thing I would say in terms of working with Europe, one of the biggest concerns we have with Europe is their privacy rules that inhibit dialogue and discussions that we have with them in terms of exchanges and the capability of identifying criminals who populate both our side of the pond and the other side.
If I have time, yes.
Just in the European Union, all of the law enforcement entities have been cooperating one to another in between their various countries on all of this. Are you saying that in terms of interacting with us, there's still a ways to go?
Yes, but in terms of the action amongst themselves, it's the lowest common denominator. And then it's a question of they have different views on privacy than perhaps we do. And that becomes a problem when the law enforcement elements of both countries want to work things out and exchange information.